presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I am Peter McKiernan. I'm the syndication product manager for Microsoft working on Bing Maps. And what that means is within Bing Maps, we really have two focuses. One is our consumer website, which is where you can go to maps.bing.com and get driving directions or shop for a hotel, look at live traffic data, that sort of thing. And that's a big part of the Bing Maps business. But what I focus on is the rest of what we do, which is working with other developers and other entities who want to use our maps in other applications, whether that's using it to help people find retail locations or to visualize data or to track where all their assets are. That's the part of the business that I work on. And this is a business that started off 10 years ago with Virtual Earth, later became MapPoint, and today is branded Bing Maps. So we have a long history of working with developers in this area. So what I wanted to do is just introduce you to the high-level view of what Bing Maps is and the types of things that we can offer. And then I'm going to hand things over to my colleague Steve Milroy from Onterra Systems, and he's going to walk through the more technical aspects of it. I can write code, but none of you would want to watch that. It's not pretty. So let's get started. The basic problem that we try to solve is that this is the way a lot of people experience data, through things like this or through charts and graphs that can only communicate so much. And what we want to do is move people to being able to experience data like this, where you can bring together a much richer level of insight by combining things and adding that geographic context, so that things that might not be apparent become readily understandable, not just by the scientist, but to the average individual or constituent whose behavior that you're trying to change by telling them a story about that data. And so it's I think about helping people see their world in new ways by either opening up, giving them information and exposing them to things that they hadn't seen before, improving the data analysis that's done by professionals such as yourself, being able to add that geographic context and layer lots and lots of different data sets on top of the same image without it becoming too difficult to navigate. And at the end of the day, it is about being able to tell a compelling story. Maps have a unique, very personal connection with people. People get very emotionally invested in the maps because it represents so many things about what they care about, where they live, where they're from. And so as a canvas for telling stories, it's very powerful and a very powerful way to help change people's behavior. If you look at things like Al Gore's presentations around An Inconvenient Truth, I mean, being able to tell that story in a really, really compelling way made that more effective at impacting climate change. And so we try to make it easy for people to do those same types of things. But we also try to run this service at a scale that is really one of the few services of its size in the world today. So we provide an excellent foundation for these things so that anywhere in the world where people want to take advantage of this, they can have an experience that's reliable and that's responsive and that's compelling. And that crosses the imagery that we have in the service. It crosses the network that we use to deliver that imagery. And it crosses the way we support the service and support you as you're working with it. And when we talk about imagery, there are many different types of imagery that is available through the Bing Map service. At the highest level, we have global satellite images. And these are basically backdrops that provide context for where all the major land masses are. And I usually say that these are things that change very slowly and very rarely. And I hope that stays the same way. And I think you guys are the ones that's going to do that. If they start changing rapidly, then I think we're all in big trouble. But so we have these backdrops for the high level, except for the polar regions. And then we go down to the next level, which is where we have satellite coverage. And our satellite coverage is provided by a number of different providers. We try to get the best of breed imagery for each market that we work in and keep it up to date within a reasonable window of time. We also use this in areas where it's remote and probably not changing as rapidly, or where for whatever reason it's not accessible to fly over with an aircraft due to regulations or what have you. But we're really investing heavily in providing also high-resolution aerial orthographic backdrops for all of our major markets, so that if you look at an area in a populated setting, it's going to have a recent, fairly high-resolution orthographic image associated with it as well. And we're also working on another project, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is really going to revolutionize this type of imagery and take it to the next level. We recently released something we call SynthView. And what SynthView is a generated 3D view of an area where we've taken different data sources and used them to automatically generate a 3D model of a city and then add the imagery to it. And what that allows us to do is present a readable map at this scale where you can pick out individual buildings and it's very clean. We can rotate this into 4 different directions, and we have this anywhere there's satellite or aerial orthographic imagery. The other part of this, which happens in more rural areas, is even if we only have a flat orthographic image, we can apply this SynthView algorithm to it, which will then make it look like it's a 45-degree orthogonal angle, or 45-degree angle. And this is proving to be very, very popular with a lot of our customers. The thing that I'm most impressed about this is if you look at this building here, you have the dome that it's caught. It's got the different steps down the side of the building. So it's really quite precise and all being done through an automated process that generates these. We also have what we call bird's eye view imagery, which is actual aerial photography shot at an angle. And we have this for most markets in the US and most main markets in Europe. And this is provided to us by a partner of ours. We recently began shooting what we call Streetside or street level imagery and driving cars around that take images and also capture LiDAR data in order to understand where the buildings are, where the road is, and so on. And we're doing this rather slowly. It's something that we're going to roll out very carefully. And we are mostly driving U.S. cities, a few U.S. cities today, and we'll be starting in the U.K. and Germany this summer. But one of the things that always comes up as a concern with this type of imagery is that when you're getting down to this level of detail that there are privacy concerns. And it's something that we take very seriously. I think Microsoft has a very strong commitment to privacy as a company. And one of the things that we've done is invested a lot of time up front before we started collecting any photography at all in being able to ensure that we're blurring out people's faces and that we're blurring out license plates in such a way that we can maintain the value of this image for people that are using it for business reasons or for navigation, but at the same time make sure we're not crossing any lines in the privacy space. And so this is before this image has been processed. You can see license plates. You can see people's faces. If you look at after, we've been able to very accurately identify where people's faces are, blur those out. We've been able to blur out license plates and do it with very little collateral damage to the larger image. There's a few things that are missing in the sign there, but it's, on the whole, less than 3% of the things that we blur out are not supposed to be blurred out. Do you have a question?
Is this manual process? Somebody goes...
No, this is all algorithmic.
Okay.
Yeah. So we wanted to really make sure we had this in place before we started to scale up on the driving side. And then, of course, we also have both road maps to put on top of all of our different imagery types. So both the standard map style and the overlays in all the different languages that we support. So that's a look at our imagery, but really what we are trying to do is provide you with a canvas for looking at your data. And being able to do that in a way that helps you understand it and helps people connect with it. So we recently released a new map style. Our older map style was very bright, had a lot of primary colors to it, and the problem with that is that it often competed with the things that you were trying to put on the map. And so we decided that our goal was to have the map provide the context, but let the data take center stage. And what that means is we went to a very cool, very unsaturated color palette so that your data can be presented in more saturated colors. There's a truism in design that cool colors recede from the eye, warm colors advance. So you can see how these bullet points draw the user's eye to them without getting confused with what the background is. So that's been a conscious choice that we've made, and we're rolling that out across all of our services now. And it's been very well received. The other thing is, when you're using colors on a map, obviously one of the most popular color scales is, especially in North America, red to green. So we didn't want to use any of those colors in the core map style because it would cause confusion. So this is very simple traffic data for Honolulu, and it's very easy to see the roads that do have data associated with them and the ones that don't. If you look at the approach taken by one of our competitors, you'll notice that they have the same data, but it's very difficult to tell which yellow roads are yellow because that's what the data is saying, or whether that's just a road that they don't have coverage on. So we really made a deliberate choice to design maps that were very usable as a canvas for data. On top of that, colorblindness, depending on the statistics you look at, can affect 7 to 9% of adult men. And that's an enormous section of the people that we're trying to reach. So we also looked very hard at how these maps perform for people that have those various conditions and making sure that they still maintain their integrity there. So we've really worked hard to make these maps very usable across a very wide range of applications. But the map isn't much good unless you can get it, and you can get it fast. And we have a content delivery network that spans the globe, It is roughly 19 nodes now and growing. And this allows us to send the map tiles from whatever node is closest to the individual user and deliver a very consistent high-performance experience around the globe. It gives us failover protection, a whole bunch of redundancy and reliability. And since we've moved to this model, we've been able to increase our delivery speeds by over 80% and really move from a good service to a great service as it relates to our competitors in our ability to get this data out. Now, I talk about enterprise level support, but basically what that means is, we back up what we do, both with service level agreements, but also with people to pick up the phone and call people if there is a problem. We have developer support, in addition to just regular operational support. So if you have questions about code or you're running into a bug, it's something that we try to stand behind very well. And there's also a very vibrant community of developers who are writing for the Bing Maps platform. We have a very active message board. We have a lot of things going up on CodeFlex and other websites that really help expand things for people working with this. We just found out that one of our partners has written a whole IntelliSense add-in for our AJAX 7 control for Visual Studio to make that easier to work with. And so it's really excellent that people can benefit from the work that a lot of other people are putting into this. And of course, it's also adaptable to you. We try to be as flexible as possible in our policies around these things. Obviously, our licensing deals with our content providers can get fairly complex, but we try not to expose that complexity to you. We try to make it simple and very clear what our terms of use are and what imagery can be used in what circumstances so that you don't have to worry about that. And then also, in cases where we're working with an educational institution or a not-for-profit, we can be extremely flexible on price all the way up to free. So we're really willing to work with you to find something that will meet your needs. And we can do that in a number of different ways, really depending on your preference. Come on in. So as you would expect, Bing Maps works with a lot of other Microsoft technologies. Works great with Azure. It works great with SQL Spatial. This allows you to very easily make architectural decisions without having to make compromises. So if you want to host your data with us, we can do that. If you want to host your data on SQL Azure, we can do that. If you want to host it on your premises, we can do that as well. So we really allow you a lot of flexibility in how things come together so that you make the decisions based on the architecture that solves your problem, not based on our limitations. And we also try to make some new things possible. So let me just give you a quick overview of what we're doing with mapping, smartphones, and some of the new imagery that's coming out. How many of you are using HTML5 today? Anyone? So about a quarter. That's great. So we support HTML5 today in our AJAX 7 control. That means that we not only get better performance in browsers that support HTML5, you'll get smoother zooming and panning and that sort of thing, but also we take advantage of the JavaScript acceleration that those browsers tend to also have, and being able to offload that processing to the GPU to just dramatically increase the performance level that we're able to deliver. And in addition, we're able to use those same controls on phones that support HTML5. So while we have SDKs for a number of different mobile platforms, you also have the opportunity to simply write an HTML5 for phones that support that, and then hopefully reduce the amount of code that you have to manage. So I wanted to touch just very briefly on a project that we have called Global Ortho. And this is really a way that we're trying to dramatically move the bar on orthographic imagery coverage, in that we are working to create a single image of the contiguous United States and Western Europe down to a 30 centimeter resolution, which basically means 30 centimeter square is 1 pixel on the screen. So we're doing this with special cameras that are made by a company named Vexel that Microsoft owns. These cameras are specifically designed for this purpose and collect terrain data, infrared data, lots of different spectrums, all at the same time. And then we take that back to our data center in Colorado, where they have a parking lot full of containers with tons and tons of servers in them. They never have to shovel the snow out of their parking lot because the servers are pretty hot. They can process petabytes of data in a day and take these imageries, stitch them together, compensate for haze and exposure and a number of different variables, and create a very beautiful, seamless image that we'll then be able to use in the Bing Map service. So right now we have about a third of the United States completed, and we have significant progress made in Europe as well. By next summer, we hope to have the entire first generation of this imagery finished. So we'll be able to provide that seamless image. Now, shooting aerial imagery is difficult to predict. You're dealing with weather. You're dealing with permits to fly over populated areas and things like that, and across all the different geographies involved. It gets a little difficult to predict exactly when you're going to have a certain area or the project finished. And this is really something that we're doing at a scale that's never been attempted before. But once we complete this, our goal is to then start going back and doing it at a higher resolution in key areas, and constantly keeping things up to date that way, and then also broaden our footprint in terms of the number of geographies that we serve as well. This is very exciting, and you'll hear, if you follow our blog, we're going to be releasing a huge batch of this imagery, and we'll be releasing a tool that will allow you to go in and see exactly the areas where we've posted this in particular. Very exciting. So how does it all work? How do you put it all together as a developer and bring that together? So I'm going to hand things over to Steve here. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. You said there are... The way you represent for the colorblindness and all the stuff, you have a different naming conventions for the resolutions and all the stuff. How do you present traffic patterns for the colorblindness? Because the traffic patterns goes by the color, right? Mm-hmm. So how did you present that?
So there's the color. The question was around colorblindness. I guess I don't have to repeat it because you used the microphone. Sorry, it's early in the morning.
The question.
When you look at how people that have color deficiencies experience different sites, they can still see differences in value. So darker or lighter, even if they have trouble differentiating between colors. And so some of the best practices there is we try to keep the different things we use, the different colors we use as far apart as possible. Because while someone might not be able to differentiate between red and light red, differentiating between red and yellow or red and blue is much easier. And there's a number of other just best practices around design that we try to follow.
Okay. And you said you take 30 months to update every refresh. Like if you take a map on a particular area, it's going to take another 30 months to get that same area updated, or how does it? You said like in that last one, 30 months for the refresh rate. So all the Bing maps.
It's only the imagery. The map itself is updated every 90 days as new roads.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The ortho imagery is what's updated.
Yeah, for those of you that didn't hear that, it's the road maps and the other imagery, the other vector data is updated on a regular basis, roughly every 3 to 6 months. The aerial imagery is on a basically rolling schedule. Once we finish the entire Global Ortho project, we're going to then be going back on a 30-month cycle to hit all the major areas. Rural areas that don't change as often will have less priority than densely populated areas.
Okay. And does this have any interface between this maps and the data market, SQL data market?
That is a great lead in to Steve. But before we hand it off, I wanted to see, did someone else have a question?
You have a couple of questions. One is about that you mentioned that you have about 19 sites to support the BIM maps now.
I'm sorry, what site?
You have about 19 server sites.
Yes, 19.
So when you select those 19 sites, what kind of factors did you consider? For example, closer to the cluster of users or the center of the backbone?
We did a number of different. We looked at a number of different factors, where traffic was coming from, and where the infrastructure was located to allow us to do that in the most efficient way possible, in terms of power, in terms of internet backbone, all of those things.
Another question is that we have been using BIMAP to development. We have different, in the GIS field or the environmental research, we normally organize data according to different layers. Mm-hmm. We're wondering that if we could control the data show up or turn off, turn on within BIMAP as layers.
Mm-hmm. To be able to turn things like labels and roads
yeah,
on
like
off.
labels, roads, or background image. Or is there any way that you can kind of set up the transparency of the background image within BIMAP?
Not within the Big Map service itself, but if you need that level of control, SQL Spatial or some other things that Steve might talk about might be able to help.
So you can hook up with the SQL Spatial to do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think that SQL Spatial. I think the question you're asking is, can we modify the underlying base road data?
That's right, yeah.
And turn features and labels and things on and off. And when you start talking about that, you are really talking about a GIS system, which you have control of all the vector data. And when you have all the vector data natively as individual features, you can turn things on and off. But then you lack performance when it comes to allowing people to access that application and use it in a web-based mode. Bing Maps, like any web mapping platform, is primarily raster-based, and we've tiled everything out to 19 different zoom levels. It's all baked into the tiles. You can overlay as much data as you want. You can turn off the Bing Maps base layer if you don't want to show imagery at that location. You just want to show your data. You can certainly turn it off, but you can't control the features because it's already pre-rendered raster tile layers to maintain good performance.
Okay, thank you. That's very good. Yeah, that gives a lot of insight about this. Yep. So another is about the browser support.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. We know that you support very good on the IE. How about others like Firefox?
So I can show you some demos on Chrome and Firefox today. Yeah. Bing Maps' perspective is it should be agnostic across all browsers, and we're working really heavily with HTML5 and HTML4 support. So by default, it's HTML4 related browsers. Where there's browsers that are HTML5, will automatically support them. So it's Firefox, Chrome, IE, mobile browsers on iPhone, Android, Windows Phone 7, BlackBerry. So really, there's pretty wide browser support. And I do have an MSDN article. If you just search, if you Bing it, and find, just search on Bing Maps browser support, it'll give you a whole list of all the versions and platforms that are supported.
The last one is that, do you plan to put up some kind of building internal data? For example, when you look at these buildings, do you plan to put up some
Building
kind
models?
of internal structure of the building models? Yeah.
Oh, the internals of buildings. So we are doing that in some areas in the U.S. right now with shopping malls, where we're putting, we're adding details of where the stores are, and you can look by floor and so on. We're working on, we've just finished SeaTac Airport. So if you look at the Seattle Airport in Bing Maps today in the road map view, you'll see the terminal mapped that way. And we're going to be rolling that out to more and more venues. But that's something that we do. It's a fairly manual process to create and keep updated, so we're taking a fairly slow approach to it.
The other thing you can consider too is there's a technology that's available in the Bing Maps platform called PhotoSynth, which takes a collection of photos and joins the similarities together, either into just a point cloud with individual photo overlay or into a true panorama. And so if you want to allow people to visualize the internals of a building, you could go and take all the photos, use PhotoSynth to join them all together into a 3D model, and then present that either on top of the map or just as a standalone view. We see a lot of people doing that for the real estate industry, for instance, where they want to highlight maybe an apartment for rent, those sorts of things. So there's a few different options, and I'll cover a couple of more when we get into the technical stuff.
Hello. We're developing a web platform for biodiversity mapping with Bing Maps in Chile, South America. So I want to know what are like you have your plans for the road maps in Latin America, because right now
They're not great?
no, the toponymy is better now, but the maps and also the global ortho project, I don't know if you're expecting to spread from other part of the world.
We would, let me answer your first question first. So when is the roadmap data in Latin America and other areas where we don't have great roadmap data now going to improve? Currently, we tend to focus updates on the service in North America and Western Europe, but we are investing heavily to improve in those areas. We just recently announced a large partnership between Microsoft and Nokia, and Nokia owns Navtech, which is one of the biggest data suppliers in the world, and so that's going to make a major impact on the quality of the maps that we'll be able to show, both in terms of the coverage and also in terms of the updates, in terms of the currency. In terms of your second question, when are we going to expand the Global Ortho program outside of the first areas that we're starting? We haven't decided. It's definitely something we want to do, but it's something that we need to look at after we've gone through the experience of doing it in the U.S. and Western Europe, and then decide where to go from there. Yes?
Can you explain the relationship between Bing Maps and OpenStreetMap?
So the relationship between Bing Maps and OpenStreetMap. Other than the fact that they're distinct mapping services, right now there's no direct connection between the two.
So is it just on the consumer site that you can enable that layer? So you can't get it in the SDK?
Do we use OpenStreetMap data on the consumer site?
Well, there's a map app that is an OpenStreet OSM map app that shows those layers on top of Bing Maps. So we've obviously been doing, Bing Maps has obviously been doing, work in trying to leverage OSM data. Primarily the strategy is to use Navtech because there is better coverage and higher quality in a lot of areas. But I think the OSM data presents an opportunity where in some countries OSM data is likely better and overlaying them. And the reality is you can take OSM tiles and overlay them on top of Bing Maps. Nothing's preventing you from doing that. So in your application, if you're using the APIs, you can use Bing Maps and then show OSM data in a particular area. There's no direct connection apart from that map app, and that map app is really just a consumer demonstration of pulling a third-party data set on top of Bing Maps.